The day that you passed your AWS application feels really strange. You get the badge, you add it to LinkedIn, you finally have something tangible to show for all those evenings and days that you spent studying for this exam. And for a moment, you feel like you've just crossed a big line, right? Then you go and open a cloud engineer job description. It asks you to design a secure infrastructure. It asks you to be able to automate deployments, troubleshoot live systems, explain trade-offs, and work with people across the business. So here you recognize the AWS services. You might even remember the correct exam answer. But if somebody removed the multiple choice options and they said, okay, go and build this, you're not completely sure where you would even start. So what happens? Well, the confidence disappears and you make a very understandable decision. Maybe I need another certification before I apply for jobs. But the next certification can leave you in exactly the same position because being AWS certified and cloud job ready are not the same standard. That's how one certification badge becomes two. The labs become more complicated, and yet the applications for jobs still does not happen. Now, this is not to say that certifications are useless. It's not, because I even have my own software company, studytech.ai, that personalizes cloud certifications for you. It actually means that certification did its job. And now you are asking it to prove something that certifications were never designed to prove. An exam can test whether you understand a defined body of AWS knowledge, but an employer needs evidence that you can use the relevant knowledge when the problem is incomplete and the answer is not on a screen and the consequences are very real. That gap is what we are going to close in this video. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Suleiman. I've been in tech for more than 11 years, and I've spent more than 7 of those working with AWS across cloud engineering, architecture, DevOps, consulting through my own businesses. I also have my Cloud Engineer Academy, where I've helped more than 900 IT professionals, engineers, and career switchers develop practical cloud engineering skills and land 6-figure cloud roles. Now, I want to be very precise about what job ready actually means, because a lot of people get this confused. Now, being job ready does not mean that a company owes you a job. It does not mean that you're even ready for every cloud role in every market. It means that you can demonstrate enough independent, role-relevant capability to compete credibly for the specific role that you're targeting. Now, it does not mean knowing all of AWS or operating like a senior engineer without any sort of support. So let's actually start by giving the certifications the credit that they deserve. Passing an AWS certification can actually prove several useful things. It can show that you committed to a goal and followed through. It can give you the AWS vocabulary and mental models needed to understand modern cloud systems. It can expose you to services and architecture patterns that you might not encounter in your current job. And depending on the role and the employer, it can also be a very useful signal on your CV. So I'm not telling you to throw the certifications away, because it can be a very strong foundation. The problem begins when you use a certification as a substitute for testing what you can do independently. This does not mean that you are a fraud, right? It means that your knowledge has not yet been converted into evidence of performance, because a certification will ask, do you understand this defined body of knowledge? But being job ready asks you, can you use the relevant parts of that knowledge to solve this particular business problem? And can another person actually trust your decisions? Now, getting from the first question to the second question requires 4 conversions. Now, conversion number 1 is recognition into judgment. In an exam question, the context has already been chosen for you, right? The relevant details are in front of you, and one answer is usually more correct than the others. Now, real cloud problems are rarely that simple. A company might say that our checkout keeps failing whenever we run a promotion, and they want you to fix it. Now, you actually have to identify what information is missing, how much traffic arrives, what is actually failing, what data is sensitive, how much downtime can the business tolerate, what can the team maintain, what is the budget. Only then can you decide whether the answer involves scaling compute, changing the database, introducing a queue, adding caching, or fixing something else entirely. That is judgment. And here's how you can make a simple test around this, right? Take one business requirement, produce 2 viable AWS designs, and explain why one fits the constraint better than the other one. Now, if you start naming services and just saying technical buzzwords before clarifying the problem, you still have a very big recognition to judgment gap. Now, another certification may add more services to your memory, but it will not automatically train you for this kind of decision making. Now, conversion number 2 is guided work into independent execution. So here, there is nothing wrong with labs or tutorials when you are learning, right? The problem is that the instructions make all the important decisions before you even arrive. The VPC design has been chosen, the services have been selected, the Terraform is fine on the screen, and if something breaks, the next paragraph tells you exactly what to check. So you finish the project and your brain records that I can do this or I can build this. But once you close the tutorial, open a blank repository, change one single requirement, and suddenly this project that you're trying to do feels completely different. When we talk about job ready, we don't mean that you have to remember every single command without any sort of documentation. Real engineers use documentation, they use search, and definitely they use AI. It actually means that you should retain your ownership, right? So can you decide what needs to be built? Can you review what AI produces? Can you change it safely? Can you diagnose a failure without deleting everything and starting again? So here, what you want to build is you want to rebuild the projects without the walkthrough. And then you want to change one requirement, deliberately break one component, use logs and metrics to find a problem, and then recover it. So conversion number 3 is turning completion into proof an employer actually can read. Right. Now, a certification badge can prove that you've passed an assessment. A GitHub repo proves that the files and folders exist. Now, neither of these automatically show what you've personally decided, what went wrong, right? Whether the system worked or how the project that you've built even relates to the job that you're trying to do. And this is where capable people become very invisible. Maybe you already work in IT, you investigate incidents, you manage access, you look at dashboards, you troubleshoot, you make changes, right? And you keep systems running. But if your CV just says, I've resolved support tickets, the employer will never actually see the underlying operating principles and disciplines that you have, right? Maybe you've built an AWS project, but a README is just a list of services and screenshots. The employer, again, has to reconstruct the meaning for themselves. So building strong proof makes 7 things very, very obvious. The business problem, the constraints, your personal contribution, the decisions and the alternatives, the implementation evidence, what failed, how you tested it, and what changed, and why this was relevant to the target role. So don't make the project more complicated just to look more advanced and look more of an expert, right? What we want to do is we want to make our judgment way more visible. The 4th conversion happens in the interview, right? A cloud interview is not only just an AWS quiz that you answer with your friends. The interviewer is actually trying to understand how you think when the requirements are ambiguous, how you react when you're challenged, whether you can recognize risk, and whether you can actually communicate around a real system. This means that a strong answer is not just listing AWS services, right? We want to start with the recommendation. We want to give the minimum context. We want to explain the important decisions, the trade-offs, the evidence, and what you would verify before you even acting. So we want to think in this cadence: answer, context, decision, trade-off, evidence, and relevance. And if you don't know something, you just say what you know. You want to state the assumptions that you're making and explain how you would find out. That creates way more trust than just bluffing through a random answer, right? So we want to practice explaining the same project in 90 seconds to a recruiter. We want to explain it in 5 minutes to an engineer, and then ask somebody to change the traffic, the budget, or the requirements and explain it again. Now, if your mind goes blank when the scenario changes, we do not want to respond by memorizing more services and memorizing more answers, right? We want to practice by reasoning out loud. So here is how I would test whether your certification knowledge is actually converting. You want to take one scenario from your certification study, remove the choices, the prescribed architecture, and the AWS service names, and only focus on the business outcome. For example, a small online business needs a customer-facing application that can survive occasional promotional traffic, protect the personal data, remain affordable outside peak hours, and be operated by a small technical team. Now you want to work through 5 different actions. Interpret, i.e. identify the missing requirements and constraints. We want to decide, so compare the approaches and justify the architecture and services. We want to deliver, so build the smallest defensible version without a step-by-step solution. We want to diagnose, secure and monitor it, introduce a failure and recover using evidence. And we want to defend. So document the work, explain it to 2 audiences, and adapt it when a constraint changes. So here you can completely and utterly use documentation. That is allowed because, like I said, real engineers use documentation. The test is actually whether you can direct the work and verify the result without borrowing someone else's entire decision-making process, which is what you do with these tutorials, right? Okay, so do not give yourself a fake job readiness score. right? You're going to find the first place where you lose your independence. Now, if you cannot turn the brief into a design, you have an architecture gap. If you can design it, but you can't build or troubleshoot it, then you have an execution gap. If you can build it, but the portfolio and CV do not make that obvious, then you have a proof or career translation gap. If you can do all of that, but you cannot explain it under pressure, then you have an interview gap. Now, this is way more useful than telling yourself that you need another certification because you still do not feel confident. So please think about what you can and can't do and figure out your gap and then focus on improving that gap. Now, once you pass, use this sequence: certification, target role, business problem, independent build, feedback, proof, interview translation, right? You want to choose the role first because job ready for cloud support is not identical to job ready for DevOps, cloud security, or solutions architecture. You want to use certification as your foundation. Build one integrated project from a blank problem, get somebody that's capable to challenge your decisions, turn the result into employer-readable evidence, and then practice defending it. More certifications may still be the correct next step when a role genuinely asks for it or the knowledge fills a relevant gap. But if your project still depends on the tutorial and the application that you're putting out for jobs are producing basically no response, or your reasoning just disappears in an interview, taking another exam is not going to solve that problem. Now, if you're still preparing for your first AWS certification, go finish it, pair each domain with a small practical build decision, then, use the job ready test after you pass. But if you've already earned a certification, completed labs or projects, worked in IT or applied for roles or reached interviews, and all that effort is not converting into confidence, interviews, or even offers, then that is a stage where a precise diagnosis matters. Inside of my Cloud Engineering Academy, we don't begin by assuming that you need more content, right? We look at the role that you're targeting, what you already know, what you've built, how independently you can work, what your CV and portfolio should prove, and how you can explain it under pressure. Then we go in and identify whether the real bottleneck is build, proof, interview performance, or translating your existing experience. So if you want me and my team to inspect that with you, use the link below to book a call with my team. If we match the gap, we explain how it works and the options available. If not, we tell you that as well. So your AWS certification is obviously not the problem. It's actually your foundation. You really want to stop asking, which certification should I do next? And you want to start asking, what can I now design, build, prove, troubleshoot, and explain without the answer sitting right in front of me? That is the key difference between AWS certified and being cloud job ready. As always, I'm rooting for you. If you need my help, book a call with my team, and I'll see you on the next one.